I'm Seth.
Nathan.
Luke.
Gentry.
And
We're talking about Boys State, the documentary. Guess we could start out. Did anybody like the movie?
It was better than I thought it'd be, honestly. Because I read the description before I watched it, and I was a little iffy about it at first. But I thought the way, because I wasn't expecting like very many conflicts or character developments or anything, so that kind of surprised me in a good way.
I was a little skeptical just because it was a documentary.
Right, me too.
And like how the story would progress and how like characters would be developed, like you said. And I feel like the character arcs of multiple characters throughout the documentary really developed in both positive and negative ways.
Yeah. Yeah, there was definitely like defining character arcs, which I thought were really cool because I don't watch a lot of documentaries, but obviously they know what they're doing. You know, and the director, whoever was definitely like made a great story out of a really weird cultural situation.
it was definitely like especially in the beginning, it was pretty like absurd, like you said earlier, that like you didn't really think that any of that you could get any of that or like a good social commentary out of that, but it really went a lot better than you think.
Do you think we could label this as an archetype? I mean,
Oh man.
Like the film as a whole, like, or
maybe even just a character like Steven or maybe Eddie, even though we don't see him much, but
I would say Steven is definitely archetypal because he was definitely like more of a hero type guy. Like he was the like follow your dreams, follow your heart, you know, upbringing. Like he definitely fit in a nice story box.
and he was definitely different than like all the other characters.
Yeah.
in
Like
this
an underdog kind of thing.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking. It was like an
That's good.
underdog kind of story.
Definitely.
That's good.
Like a Rocky, like underdog.
Yeah.
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 He just stayed pure-hearted the whole time.
Even though he was completely, I mean, objectively different from most people that were there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He felt like the conquering hero that ended up losing, but in his own way, kind of won his
Yeah.
own battle.
We all saw him as a winner, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, he saw himself as a winner because even after when he was calling his mom, he's like, "I'm not crying because I lost. I'm crying because like I affected so many people, like impacted them."
He definitely had like a man versus self conflict throughout the story, and even man versus man at the same time. When battling Eddie, we didn't really hear much about him until the end.
Yeah.
So I don't know what we could label Eddie as, but
That's why, because I struggled with that, because I wanted to label this as kind of like, oh, a good versus evil kind of
Yeah.
archetype, but I
Right.
couldn't find myself to do that, because one, we don't know, like, evil, it's kind of hard to define in
Don't
this
know his
situation.
perspective.
and the antagonist changed like twice. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
originally Rob, then it was Eddie, but then it was kind of Ben at the end.
Yeah.
But the antagonist is also like kind of comes from your own political viewpoint.
Exactly.
and that's what I was gonna
Yeah,
say
that's
is that I think man versus self is a really good way to describe this. Like, cause everyone here had like something they were fighting with themselves, except maybe Steven.
But I feel like we can arguably say that Steven was the protagonist.
Right,
Not
I
because
think
of
so.
political views, but
Yeah.
just based on the storyline and how it went.
I think there's definitely some foreshadowing, especially in the very first scenes where they went to those specific people and like did the interviews with them. You're like, okay, this is who this is going to be about. So,
Right.
Yeah.
They had like those labels,
Mhm.
but
Yeah, definitely.
Because there were thousands of people. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard to find.
Was it like 1,100 or something
Yeah,
like that? It's crazy.
Yeah, and like those beginning shots, like with I don't know, that really works with like the cinematography of like the whole film. Really, I liked a lot, especially like those beginning shots. That whenever it followed like Steven, whenever he was just getting on the bus or whatever, just like knowing that like showing that like he's gonna be important or something.
Yeah.
and even the POV shots of like the Instagram swiping and like
Oh, yeah.
things that they would do like
Yeah.
at this time.
It felt
Camera
really like grounded. Like
Yeah.
they knew what was going on in the kids' heads, which was really cool.
Yeah, I definitely through like the camera angles and stuff, you could definitely tell it was really well made.
Yeah.
So,
Have you guys ever heard of Boys State? I mean,
No.
I like had no
No.
idea that this
I didn't even
was
know
a
that was like
thing.
a thing.
Yeah.
At all.
Never knew
It's a
that.
pretty cool concept though.
Yeah.
Like for office or something.
Yeah.
I
I
feel
feel it
like
plays into like the social commentary aspect of that too. Where,
Right.
'cause I think it was one of the last things where it might have been Steven that said we can see like this is something we can do better than the adults. Like we can show
Yes,
that the next
yeah.
generation has promise and everything.
I especially liked that. I mean, in the beginning, they portrayed like these 17-year-olds doing what 17-year-olds do, joking about like, I mean, he joked about like penis size, and like,
Yeah.
Right.
then they were talking about like weird laws that they would throw out. But then they took it more seriously towards the end and like actually looking at the political issues that they were like focusing on and voting who they thought would be the best candidate.
And I thought it was great because the director definitely made a point, I think, to make it seem absurd. Because, like, I remember just in the beginning, there was, like, shots of them eating and drinking, and, like, there was piano playing and whatever. And I was just like, why? It was going on for so long, and I was like, oh, because they're kids. This is a summer camp.
Yeah, it's a summer.
This
yeah,
is a
it's
summer camp.
Yeah.
And then the next shot was gun rights, and the guy was almost crying because the Santa Fe shooting was like a couple weeks ago, you know?
I did think that was really weird how they had like those intermission, like,
Yeah.
the talent show, the people
The talent show,
auditioning
yeah.
for the talent show. It was just kind of like interspersed to be like, oh, this is just a week.
It is
long.
literally
Yeah, it's
exactly.
It's not that like it's serious, but it's not that serious. It's not
But-
the actual election.
And then they compare it, and then they're talking about abortion rights the next
Right.
minute, which is really weird.
Yeah.
Because like I don't hate you as a person, but like
No.
at the same time, I'm
Right,
still gonna
right.
like scream at you
Right.
more in that
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
Yep.
It was cool to see them like at the end of the day, they're also like friends, hang out with each
Yeah.
other, did regular stuff. So.
Yeah.
More so like after I've been in this class, I always just think about like how even like the dumbest stuff you may think like in a film, like it has importance, and like it was intentional and they meant that. So it was definitely, it made me think about that more when watching it.
I guess kind of shifting gears here. What did you all think about, I don't know if it was technically a resolution, but kind of the ending sequences? Because I feel like it was kind of set up, especially with the propaganda that was going on, where it was kind of a protagonist-antagonist kind of thing. So I was wondering, how did you all see that ending play out? Like, what did you think about that?
I liked it. I mean, it just, especially from like a documentary point of view, it shows that they actually did something with their experiences, all of them, regardless of what happened. Stephen didn't win, but he still spoke at the Democratic convention. I can't remember who else they featured. It was Renee, right?
Yeah, Renee
Renee
was
also spoke, and they just like furthered their careers. I kind of liked the resolution and how they went ahead and showed that, because this was the actual documentary took place in 2018. I'm assuming that the like Democratic convention happened quite recently. So it's kind of like, oh, this is actually happening to this day.
Should we talk about like the social commentary and how that like it was a lot deeper than like you may have thought from like a silly story as it may be, like it really had something to say about like American politics in general, like how the good person will ultimately like lose, but he like through like corruption or like propaganda, like talk about it.
I think it was very powerful that Rob came out and said, I came out being a rah-rah guy, trying to get everyone hyped up and agree with what everybody agrees with just to get elected. And he even tried to resign, but he was like, I might as well try.
Yeah.
But it still didn't work.
Yeah.
And he still lost to Steven. And Steven was pure of heart. I think that says a lot.
I thought that was great.
And then he ended up losing.
And then he
too.
lost, but that was a victory. I think beating Rob was a big victory because, like, Rob literally said, like, no, I'm pro-choice. But
Right.
that's not what you have to say to win. you
Right.
know?
And that's kind of reflective of like adults in politics as well.
Yeah.
You know, you get to say whatever you have to say to get the votes, to keep your job. You know, so.
Just please the crowd.
He even said that. He's like, I understand why politicians lie now. Like, it's easier to lie and to get into office than to stick with what you know, and everyone bashing you for it.
Exactly.
I think I really appreciated what Renee had to say when he got elected as well,
Yeah.
about him being in the middle and
Right.
there's being
Right.
right and
I
left
loved
brain.
that analogy. I've
He
never
was
heard
really
that
He was,
before.
I mean, he was a very well-spoken man.
So
right?
well
17 years old.
Yeah, I was very encapsulated by
He
his
was
speech.
amazing.
His speech was so good.
I want to meet him.
Better than
Like,
Yeah. And I guess one of the things that stood out to me too was kind of they weren't split into parties; they were just split into two completely random groups. So it's kind of that was kind of like we talked about in the social commentary. You still get those divides even though you're in like the same parties, I guess.
Yeah.
So no matter where you're going to be, there's conflict with that. So
It reflects American bipartisanship for sure.
It's like American values, like it's either you're really like right or real on the left. So,
And then also something that I thought about was like all the people who couldn't care, who couldn't care less.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the people who are just there to scream and yell in the back,
Right.
like the Marjorie
Just hype
Taylor
them up.
Greens and the you know, they're just there to make noise.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really funny too.
I also noted the like Steven's stance and how he said, yes, I organized this march, but that doesn't mean I'm anti-gun.
Yeah.
And he really made a point about that, especially that was like the main point of contention for this race
Yeah.
between the two. And he made a point of like, you know,
Standing by it.
right, and he's
Yeah.
like, this is what happened. This is the explanation, and I think that reflects American politics. Like, you have a tweet on someone from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
They're never gonna have a political career
Yeah.
if they made a tweet that was something they said as a stupid 10-year-old or something like that.
And that was also something that I saw in his kind of contrast with Rob too, where it's like Rob was completely shifting his views to kind of appeal, where Steven was like, yeah, you know, I did this and I'm gonna stand by it, and here's
Yeah.
why. And you can see, so.
And like, here's the explanation. They're trying to reflect this upon me as bad, but that's not the case.
We good?
Alright, any last comments from anyone?
I would like to say the archetype, or I'm sorry, not the archetype, the character arc
Yeah.
of Rob
Yeah.
and Ben, right? It was Ben.
Yeah, because Ben was definitely like we like had his side in the beginning, but then he, what you said earlier.
Yeah, like I think somebody said like kind of a downward spiral, I guess,
Yeah.
where it was like, oh, we see him as this like way to triumph, and he's like, I guess you can't really call it. It's hard to call him an antagonist because he's doing what he thinks.
Yeah.
Or like because
Right.
he's nothing super wrong about antagonistical about it. But
I just felt that he like was who we were rooting for in the beginning. Him and Steve, like I felt we were going to
Yeah.
be rooting for Steven and Ben in this governor race,
Yeah.
and he even backed out of the governor race. He was originally going to go for governor, and we're still rooting for him. And then he starts. I don't know. He
His
kind of
power,
the way he
That was real
approached the
corruption, I feel like.
situation was just kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But,
poor taste, I thought. Too.
Yeah.
right, like not that I disagree or agree with his statements on or like political views, but just the way he approached things, just kind of
Yeah, definitely.
his character arc went down in that sense. And so he originally was like a great speaker and treated everybody fairly
Yeah.
and treated everybody with respect, and then he kind of went a little sideways.
Do we want to give a thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways?
Yeah.
Okay, 3, 2, 1.
That was, yeah. I'll give it a thumbs
I
up.
got 45 degrees.
Yeah. Interesting at first, but definitely
Yeah.
something I would recommend. to
It
someone
took a
who's
minute to like
interested.
for me to get into it.
Yeah.
Definitely took a minute to get going.